everybody. We're back for more of the Earl on the Train. We are up to chapter 23 now, and stuff is picking up fast. Chapter 23, The Best Laid Plans. Ow! Nick fished yet another hairpin from beneath the tangled sheets, and tossed it into the growing pile on the bedside table. He pitied the maid who had to replace the bed linens in the morning and pick up all the pointy metal slivers they would surely leave behind. He spied a pin remaining in Ida's hair and gently worked it loose. That one, at least, wouldn't stab him while he snuggled her. He toyed with her golden locks, so smooth and silky against his skin. God, but she was perfect. He must have had some rare stroke of luck to have found himself here, with such a woman in his arms. Nothing could have prepared him for the supreme bliss of bedding her, or the soul-wrenching love that now flooded him in the aftermath. She didn't need him in any way, this woman of courage and passion, and yet she'd given him the gift of herself, freely, with no expectations. He owed her the world. She shivered in her sleep and burrowed against him. Reluctantly, he tugged a blanket over her, hiding the body he could have gazed upon for hours at a time. He doused the oil lamp beside the bed and closed his eyes, content to let his other senses have their fill of her. She smelled of sweat and sex and strawberries. It would be with him forever, this scent. He would go to his grave remembering it. The scent of her, the scent of happiness. Next thing he knew, a rosy morning glow filled the cabin, and a new scent pricked at his nostrils. Dark, rich, bracing. His eyes snapped open. His arms were empty, the place beside him cold. "Good morning," her cheery voice greeted him. She had already dressed, he noted with disappointment, but the pot of coffee she had ordered for him almost made up for it. He crawled up out of bed to pour himself a cup. "Do you do this at home?" she asked, when he had settled himself at the table with his coffee and a sticky breakfast cake. "Do what?" "Have your coffee in the altogether." Nick grinned and quirked an eyebrow. "You'll have to follow me home and find out." Stormy desire swirled in her blue eyes, but she forced her gaze away from him and picked up the guidebook that lay on the table beside her empty teacup. "That does sound appealing, but since we arrive in Bombay within the hour, I'm afraid we must first focus on work matters. Are you prepared for our arrival?" "That depends. Am I an invading barbarian? If not, I'd best finish my coffee and dress before I disembark." "I was speaking of travel precautions, not your nakedness." She waved a hand in his direction, carefully avoiding looking directly at him. "As I'm certain you're aware, various diseases are prevalent in tropical climates such as this, and we must take care to protect ourselves. Water ought to be boiled. Tea, coffee, and spirits are the safest drink. Have you brought any medicines?" "Medicines?" Nick echoed. "Just those in my coat pockets, but you know I don't drink potions." "Mundane medicines are sufficient. Quinine to treat malaria, for instance. I have a supply, though I hope we shall not need it. One also ought to carry Cockle's pills for indigestion and liver complaints, and what the deuce is a liver complaint?" "The book doesn't elaborate on that. It says only that one ought to have the pills, along with chlorodyne, which can be used to treat cough, consumption, fever, cholera, and dysentery. Epilepsy, hysteria, gout, toothache, well, you get the idea." "Indeed, I do." Quack medicine. He didn't even know of any potions that could cure such a wide array of complaints. Most potions against disease were far more specific. He wouldn't rule out the possibility of a cure-all, having experienced the effectiveness of the potion Ida had used on his knife wound. To date, though, he'd heard tell of no such thing. "Oh, look at this." Ida lowered the book and pointed at an ad. "Invalid furniture and appliances. Perhaps we might invest in a wheeled chair to move you about during your bouts of seasickness." "Are you mocking me, Miss Quimby?" Her nose made a delightful little twitch when she smiled. "Perhaps a little. Now, the other problem we ought to concern ourselves with is the prevalence of insects. Recent scientific papers have demonstrated the ability of mosquitoes to carry disease, and to that end I have developed a perfume of cedar, sage, cloves, and camphor to repel them. I suggest you spray a bit on your clothing as well as any uncovered skin." "Ida," he sighed. "Yes?" "I know you're trying to protect me from any and all troubles, and I will be happy to use your anti-mosquito perfume. But in all honesty, I must say I'm far less concerned with disease than with the possibility of an attack. We've had no trouble on board this ship, and that concerns me. I fear someone may be lying in wait upon our arrival." "Have you seen that thin-faced man?" "No, but if he has hidden himself among the second-class passengers, we will have had little opportunity to encounter him." "I haven't seen him either, nor the Holbecks." "Who?" "Your faux Americans. Their name is Holbeck. I found it unlikely that they have merely disappeared, after all the attacks and warnings." "Precisely. We must take steps to protect ourselves." "I do have my knife, and you have the defensive potions. Do you think we ought to purchase additional weapons?" Nick cringed. "I despise weapons and have no notion how to use them." "Surely you can fence or shoot?" "No." A frown twisted her mouth. "I thought that was required knowledge for a gentleman." He shrugged. "As you know from my stories, I wasn't the most masculine of boys, preferring tea parties to sport. My father was a scholar, so as long as I learned my Latin and Greek, he didn't pressure me. I will watch tennis or cricket, but I don't play. And I've never touched a firearm. I'm fortunate that my natural size and strength safeguarded me from the worst of the tauntings at school. I will fight to defend myself or another, but given the choice, I'd rather just sit down to tea." "Or naked coffee." He lifted his cup to her. "Only with you, my sweet." Nick shifted to catch some of the breeze from Ida's fan. He drummed his fingers irritably on the desk while the man behind it puttered about, seemingly uninterested in the fact that he was neglecting paying customers. And this was supposed to be the best hotel in town? Ida fanned harder. "Just think, when we left London we were shivering in our winter coats, and now it is dreadfully hot." Nick cleared his throat loudly. Again. The lobby was stifling. He couldn't wait to get to a room where he could open a window and let the breeze cool him. And perhaps strip both himself and Barry's of all their clothing. Merely to cool off, of course. The man turned around at last, eyeing Nick's coat with suspicion. He was bloody tired of that look. Perhaps it was time to retire the coat at last, and have a new one made. Or maybe he wouldn't get a new one at all. He'd tell Ilston he was quitting, and then go back to redecorating his house. This time with a wife at his side. She'd need a brand-new dressing room, her own study, and a place to craft her perfumes. He could suit the drawing room to her tastes. "Can I help you?" Nick's attention flew back to the jaded concierge behind the desk. "Yes, there should be a room for us under the name Masterson." "One moment." He turned away, flipped through a book, and shuffled a number of papers. After half a minute of this, he placed a stack of telegrams on the desk. "Here you are. Those all came in for you yesterday evening." Nick picked up the stack, scanning the top message. "Oh, for the love of—" He broke off before he could utter something inappropriate in public. "What's wrong?" Ida asked. "Nothing, except that my mother stubbornly refuses to understand the concept of telegrams. She sent me a whole letter here, probably all in perfect, elegant sentences. 'My dearest Nicholas, I hope that this missive finds you well. I received the brief note you sent from Suez.' On and on. It must have cost a small fortune. At least she cares, I suppose." He glanced up at the concierge. "And our room key?" The man began to thumb through papers again, while Nick returned to his letter. He wanted to hear what his mother had to say about his intent to marry. "You sounded most adamant in your desire to marry Miss Quimby. I regret to inform you that you ought to reconsider such a match. The girl was involved in a terrible scandal 2 years ago, and has not appeared in society since. I am surprised you did not know of it, as your friend Carsley was the jilted party. Miss Quimby is said to have humiliated him and made a spectacle of herself. She may be a fortune hunter, if her family has disowned her. Or she may be a title hunter, if she is anything like her parents. It certainly appears, even from your terse words, that she has already stolen your heart, but still I must caution you to guard yourself, and be absolutely certain of who she is before you do anything foolish. I hope that this letter does not come too late. When you arrive home, if your wishes are unchanged, we can discuss the matter further. Until then, I remain your loving mother, etc." "Damn right it's too late," he muttered. "Bring a pen and paper along with that key," he called to the concierge. "I need to write a telegram." The man turned around. "I'm afraid we have no record of your room request, Mr. Masterson." "What?" Nick's brows knit together. "I received a telegram telling me that my request had been received and the room would be waiting when I arrived." He dug through his pockets in search of papers, finding nothing. "I have it in my trunk, I believe." The man behind the desk merely shrugged. "The paper will do you no good. We have no record of you, and no other rooms available. You will have to go elsewhere." Ida stepped up to the desk, closing her fan with an angry snap. "You would speak so rudely to a peer of the realm? Go back to those papers and look for a reservation for Lord Sharp. If you don't have one, I would suggest you make one promptly and deliver it with an apology." Nick had to work to keep the scowl on his face. She would make a wonderful countess, his berries. She was a natural leader, and the staid old blue bloods could learn a thing or two from her. The concierge remained unmoved. "I can tell you without looking again, madam, that we have no such reservation." That, at least, was the truth. Nick hadn't used his title since Paris, except for the fit of idiotic jealousy that had him throwing it around at Mr. Featherhead's ball. "You had my mail," Nick said, keeping his voice stern, but even. "That is proof enough that I ordered a room here, even without producing the papers that explicitly state that I not only ordered a room, but received a confirmation of such from the management of this hotel. For an establishment that purports to be the finest in the city—" "We are the finest in the city," the man interrupted. "Only the most distinguished of guests. Europeans only. You'll find no heathens or savages here, and certainly no—" Nick spun around and stormed out, unwilling to listen to another hateful word. He'd sleep on the docks before letting that place have a single farthing. Ida jogged after him. "What a horrid man! Better to go somewhere else. I will consult the guide for more options." "There's another hotel down the street. We can send someone for our things once we've secured a room." She dug into her satchel and flipped rapidly through her book. "I don't believe that hotel is listed here." "Never mind that. It'll do." "But to go to a place that hasn't been at all recommended? After what a poor experience we have had with the hotel that was recommended?" "It just goes to show you can't trust those guidebooks." She stopped in her tracks. "I planned my entire journey with my guidebooks. They helped me pack. They got me on board all the correct trains and ships. They showed me hotels and restaurants that have all been excellent up until this one that you selected. I have found my way around foreign cities using only the provided maps and learned the proper customs to avoid insulting the locals. My plans were perfect until you... Ida!" He cupped her face with both hands. "Ida, you're right. I'm sorry. I never meant to insult, only tease. Your guidebooks served you well, and your plans were perfect. You were amazing." He tucked a little unruly curl behind her ear. "Utterly amazing. I never stop thinking of you. I count the minutes when we are apart." He froze. His thoughts snapped into alignment, like the hand of his watch hitting high noon. Bloody fucking hell! Had he been treating her like a replacement for potions this entire time? Like some kind of thing that he craved? The balm for his addiction, the distraction from his troubles. He'd seized hold of her and refused to let go. No wonder he'd been such an impulsive arsehole. She deserved so much better. "Nick?" Her hand lifted to cover his. "Is everything all right? You've gone a bit pale. Are you land sick now, after so long at sea? Because I will drag you to the hotel if necessary. I've done it before. I can do it again." The fierceness in her gaze sprung something loose in him. No, she was no mere thing to him. She was a woman, complex and unique, soft curves and rock-hard strength, full of cares and worries, fears and hopes, all things he wanted to share, and he wanted to share his own with her. He'd been stupid, arrogant, selfish. But he was learning, bettering himself. Did he crave her? Certainly. But he also loved her, trusted her, respected her. He would leave their future in her hands. He would ask, but she would decide. No, I'm not sick. I'm in awe. I'm in love. I will never read your guidebooks, but I love how you love them. I love your plans. I love the tireless way you work to get everything just so. I love your attention to detail. I love the way you anticipate all possible problems to make the journey as safe and comfortable as possible. I love how you scold me for my own lax preparations. I love that when everything goes amuck, you pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and forge ahead with new plans, determined to make the best of everything. I love the way you've turned a tedious assignment into the best damn weeks of my life. I love you, Ida. I love you like a desert loves the rain. You're that rare, beautiful treasure, bringing a burst of life and joy to this parched land." He released her, though his body screamed for him to kiss her with everything he had. This road was too busy, however, too public. He could hold out until they reached the privacy of her room. "Nick," she gasped. She stared at him a long moment, her mouth agape, then placed a hand over his heart. The heat of her palm against his chest nearly undid his resolve. "You are not a desert," she said. "You are a lush, wild jungle, teeming with life and color." "Hot," he breathed, relishing the color the word brought to her cheeks. She licked her lips. "Moist." "We need to go. Now." He took her arm and started down the street at a pace verging on indecorous. Only Ida's love of scanning the sights kept him from breaking into a run. She dragged him to a slow walk, pointing and chattering about the lush greenery giving way to crowded streets, the mix of Eastern and Western architecture, and the beautiful colors of the women's saris. When a monkey scampered past, a stolen bit of fruit in its paws, she squealed with delight, and Nick almost kissed her right there in the street. Again. He was contemplating naughty things to whisper in her ear when she seized hold of his coat and hauled him behind a loaded wagon. "Berries! What?" "Mr. Holbeck!" she hissed. She peeked around the edge of the cart, then ducked back. "Is he following us?" "No. He looks to be headed toward the hotel we just left." "Where he expects to find us." "Exactly." She checked again. "I think you're right. I think we should take a room somewhere that's not in the guidebook." "And under a different name. How would you feel if I were to become Mr. Quimby for the night?" "That would be adorable, but too obvious. I suggest Creed." "Who's Creed?" "Her Majesty's favorite perfume house." "Ah, and what happens when I forget my new name?" "I'll do all the talking." She peeked around the wagon again. "Get ready to run, Mr. Creed. We are almost in the clear." "Did I mention that I love the way you protect me?" "Someone has to do for you what you do for others. I couldn't stand to lose you." They raced together the rest of the way to the hotel. A few minutes of arrangement saw them locked safely in an elegantly appointed room. Ida settled herself into a chair, studying her map of the city and reviewing her notes. Nick sat on the edge of the bed, watching her, his body still tense, his mind racing. He both loved and hated the fearless way she strode into danger, refusing to let her enemies intimidate her. Soon she would set out to explore the town, purchase ingredients for her perfumes, and confront her ass of a brother. No one would stop her, though she knew enemies were lurking nearby. He would do anything to protect her. But he was no warrior. All he had were a handful of potions and a certainty that he would die before letting harm come to her. He prayed it would be enough. Only a couple more chapters left before the end. Good night, guys.